talk about, okay, good, we're recording. So I'm just gonna kind of jump in because we got a lot of stuff to cover. Let's take a look. So the first, question I kind of wanted to answer is, hey, how do I get access to SOLIDWORKS routing? And it comes with two different packages now. It used to only come with one, but SOLIDWORKS recently announced that we now have what's called SOLIDWORKS Ultimate. So if you want to use these routing tools that I'm going to show you, you have to have at least SOLIDWORKS Premium. Right, so normally when we're talking about SOLIDWORKS, people are used to standard, professional, and premium. Now we also have SOLIDWORKS Ultimate, which includes all of this information, all of these things, but also gives you access to the 3D experience, so all the different cloud apps. There's a whole bunch of things that they've been adding. So now if you want to use routing, again, you have to have either SOLIDWORKS Premium or SOLIDWORKS Ultimate. Routing is an add-on, right? So we're going to kind of dive into SOLIDWORKS a little bit early. So to turn it on, right, we need to go into the add-on section. And you can see here, we can turn on SOLIDWORKS routing. And now let's talk about, hey, what is routing, right? What are we actually doing with this tool? And this tool lets us do a lot of stuff. It's really cool. It makes creating things like pipes or wires or tubing incredibly fast. It allows us to have a library we're going to talk about that we can just drag and drop things, and then it can actually automatically create all of these routes for pipes and all of these different types of things instead of going in and having to manually create, hey, this is a 3D line, and it's going to go down and it's going to connect things. It actually can do all that for us. So when we're talking about routing, we're talking about piping, tubing, electrical, and then of course, because of SOLIDWORKS, we can always customize things. They say there's two sides of routing. I like to split up piping and tubing. So the two sides of routing is we can do electrical, which we have an example of right here. I'm going to show and I'm going to talk about electrical, but I'm not going to demo it live because I'm a bit better with piping and tubing. So we'll talk about electrical, but then afterwards we're going to talk about piping and tubing, and I'm actually going to do some live demonstrations of, hey, how does this actually work? So again, there's two sides of it. Normally everyone kind of puts the piping and tubing together, but I'm going to show an example of piping, and I'm also going to show an example of tubing. And so, like I had mentioned, let's first talk about electrical. So the basics of electrical, 1 second. We're going to see this with routing and piping as well. But when you are starting a route, when you're starting to use these tools, we're going to be creating a subassembly, and we're going to have inside of that subassembly a few different things that we're going to add. We're going to need some components. So for electrical, we're going to have fittings, connectors, clips, and things like that. With routing, with the, or not routing, piping and tubing, we're going to have flanges. We're going to have, things to make the tubes from one size to another. We're going to have like T's, parts like that. Then the second part of electrical routing is the wires and cables. Because again, what are we doing here? We're trying to create these wires. We're trying to create all of these different sub-assemblies. So again, with electrical, we're going to talk wires and cables. With piping and tubing, we're going to talk pipes. We're going to talk about flexible tubing. And then the features. So how does SOLIDWORKS actually do this, right? How does this, know where to put these wires? It creates a 3D sketch. So just an example, because again, instead of doing the electrical live, I'm just going to do the quick video of it. But here's a very fast video that I like to show of how you can use the SOLIDWORKS routing to very quickly go in and create these, like wire harnesses and be able to move those wires around. I like to point out when we're over here, right, what we just did. Something that's really cool with this, with these flexible things like the flexible wires and the flexible tools, we're able to do things like add clips. So instead of just having, if you build computers or anything like that, how much of a nightmare is cable management? Making sure you have all your wires all neatly going into one section. We can actually take advantage of things like clips to be able to show and make things neat and prepare of, hey, this is how I'm going to actually set this guy up. Now, when we talk about the electrical side of it, we also have something called electrical 2D and electrical 3D in SolidWorks. So a big question is always, okay, well, what's the difference, right? Why would I might need SolidWorks routing versus SolidWorks electrical? When we're talking about SolidWorks electrical and SolidWorks routing, they're both going to use a parts library. So we're going to talk about the library. I'm going to open it up. I'm going to show you around it. So they both use libraries. But when you're talking about SolidWorks electrical, there's electrical 2D and electrical 3D, and you have to have 2D to be able to run 3D. And having the 2D allows you to have more symbols. We're allowed to have the 2D schematics. You can set up these 2D schematics and then have electrical 3D go in and create the connections for you. So you can do a bit more, right? Than when we're talking about routing. Routing is all CAD. Routing is all, hey, I'm going in, or I shouldn't say CAD, 3D CAD. You have to go in, you have to say, hey, it starts here, it ends here, and then you go and you're gonna move and adjust things. When we're talking about electrical, again, you can do a bit more. You can have, again, those 2D schematics and things like that. So what's the difference? It depends on what you need, right? So a lot of this is, hey, which one should I choose? It completely depends on the use case. It depends on what are you trying to accomplish. So like I said, I know I went through that pretty fast, just took me 5 minutes, but I want to really get into piping and tubing because it's really cool. I like to show all these different things with it. So I'm going to jump straight into SolidWorks and let's just get into a demo and let's actually start creating these routes. All right. So let's talk setup. What is going on here? Right. I'm starting off in a top level assembly and I have, right, some tanks in here. And what I need to do is I need to go in and I need to say, hey, this tank is going to connect to these two guys. Meanwhile, this tank over here, it needs to connect to some of these other tubes or these other tanks. I have a weldments structure in here, then I just have some floors. And again, I'm just trying to set the scene of what I have set up first. The reason I want to do this, and the reason I want to explain this stuff is because when we are talking about routing, what it's going to do is going to do top-down assembly modeling. And if you don't know what that means, when we're talking about top-down assembly modeling, we're talking about, hey, I have an assembly already made, right? Those ASM files. And now I'm going to sit inside of that assembly with all of the other parts that are around me, and I'm going to make stuff. I'm going to make some changes. I'm going to make, create something out of nothing. So when we're talking about top-down assembly modeling, right, we're starting off in that top level assembly. I'm going to sit inside of that assembly and I'm going to create a subassembly. To start routing, we're going to go into our design library. The design library is over here on the right. And with just standard SolidWorks, if you've ever messed around with this, we have a design library already in here. This isn't something that's special just to routing. Design libraries are a great spot to have automatic annotations for different parts that you might have to use kind of over and over again. There's something that's really cool in here where you can actually create features and cutouts. And if those features and cutouts are going to be the same in a bunch of different places, I like to use the example, I worked at a lock company. And if you think of a door, like a doorknob with a bunch of different locks, the doorknob's going to stay the same, but the type of lock, is it going to be a key? Is it going to be a push button? Is it going to be nothing? It's going to be just, a little hole. Those keys are going to stay the same in all the different all the different doorknobs. So creating features that say, hey, this is what the cutout looks like, you're able to drag and drop, right, and reuse. So it's a really powerful tool. Again, it just comes with SolidWorks. The design library is really awesome. We can also do things like forming tools in here. If you're doing 2D drawings, you can actually create notes and you can have, just standardized notes that you can drag and drop. But with this guy, we're going to use the routing library. And inside of the routing library, we have a whole bunch of stuff in here. right? We talked about electrical, there's conduits, there's HVAC, because there's actually the ability to use routing for HVAC. If you ever take a routing course, we go over this. But I'm going to, again, talk about piping. And so with this, we have a whole bunch of different options of standardized parts that SOLIDWORKS just gives us, right? This just comes included. You are not, stuck to this, because again, with SolidWorks, we can customize. We can customize. We can create things from scratch. We can use the parts that they gave us and we can actually add more to them. So we're able to really build out this library and make it look however we need. There's also things online where people have already done that, right? And you can download different flanges or whatever kind of parts that you need. So we're going to, first things first, let's talk about flanges, because how am I going to say, hey, SolidWorks, start a pipe from this guy? Actually, we're going to start from this one right here, the first one, and I want it to connect here. So I'm going to just drag and drop, because that is how we start the routing tool. Right, I'm going to use a welding neck flange. And when I pull it over here, do you see how it's too big? Something that's awesome, depending on how your configurations are set up, routing is actually going in here and it's measuring it for me, and then it's changing the configuration to be the size that I need. Right, so we just saw it was way too big. I'm still left mouse holding. So if I let go of my left mouse, now it's going to pop up, hey, these are the configurations that we can use if you want to change this. So if I want to change the pipe size, right, again, this is all about customization. This is all about what do you need this tool to do. I'm just going to leave it standard. We're just going to use the standard flange with the standard pipe size. I'm going to hit OK. And now, because I have just told SolidWorks, hey, I just put a routing part from the routing library in here, so we need to start routing. The first thing it's going to do is going to say, all right, Lynette, let's go. Start routing properties. I can come in here, I can choose different templates that I need to choose. If I have a really specific origin, I need to have this subassembly that I'm going to be creating, we can actually change right where that origin, where that 000 is going to start. We can do things like add weld gaps. We can use standard lengths. I'm going to just use elbows. So when SolidWorks is going to go in here and create things, it's going to actually insert elbows. All right, and now I'm going to hit OK. And we're going to see a lot of things kind of change. All right. So a couple things I want to point out that just happened. If you have ever done top-down assembly modeling, right, this should feel familiar. Because again, what am I doing? What did I just explain? I'm in the top level part, and now I'm focusing in on a brand new assembly that I'm creating. So when you are doing, it's called editing in context.